Hey guys, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about how we create stability in our shoulder and in our hip and how that kind of funnels to everything else we're doing. So we talk about getting tight a lot in the gym. We want this to effectively be something we develop, and it turns into just we do all of these things all together. But in the beginning, we kind of have to go through the motions and go through the checklist one at a time to make sure that we're in the proper positioning here. So what is that get tight checklist? We draw the lower abs in, hold a Kegel, squeeze our butt cheeks with our feet even and flat on the floor. We create torque in our hip by twisting our feet in the floor. We're going to pull our rib cage down, and we're going to stand as tall as we can with that rib cage down, and we're going to create torque in a stable shoulder position by rotation there. So it's the torque in the shoulder and the torque in the hip that we're going to really focus on. If I'm not actively doing anything in the shoulder, then a lot of times we just get dumped into these secondary positions where we're just hanging on things. We're hanging on our ligaments and tendons, and just we're not in optimal position. So if I'm here and I go to pull or I go to push on something, if I'm going to pull, I'm using primarily my bicep, and I've got the front of my shoulder as the support here. But if I get that shoulder back in its socket and create torque by twisting into something, then I can really get these giant muscles back here involved. Those muscles are going to be the primary movers to move and support, and then my secondary movers are going to be with it. So if I take care of my shoulder, it's going to take care of my elbow and my wrist and everything else. If I take care of my hip, it's going to take care of everything else. So going back to video one, our intro, what we really talk about is just how our priority is bracing our spine and then getting our shoulders and our hips in good position. So what we're going to talk about right now is the specific torque and when we would twist and what direction we twist and kind of how we think about it. So first thing is, no matter which way we're twisting, I can twist my wrist without anything happening really in the shoulder. So when we say twist or torque or create tension, what we're trying to do is, with the joint in its place, we're trying to wind that joint up. Act like you've got your fist here. We're winding this up to hold it in a strong position that's going to use its primary muscles to be its movers. So as I twist and stand, it's not so much really what I'm doing with my hands, it's what I'm doing up in these areas, okay? So keep that in mind. It's not simply we're twisting our feet in the ground or twisting our hands into something or a direction. We're trying to get that torque and that rotation through that shoulder joint and through that hip joint. So as I'm standing in neutral, or anytime a joint is flexed, so let's talk about that. With the shoulder, neutral is going to be shoulder straight down. Flex is going to be anything coming out in front of me up over my head. With the hip, neutral is going to be just standing here. Flexed is going to be anything with that leg out in front of me. Or as I squat down, my hip is now bending, it's flexed. So when we talk about flex positions, we need external rotation. So that's going to be rotating your hands outward, rotating your feet outward. Of course, we're not going to let our feet rotate, but we're going to create that torque and tension in our hip and in our back of our shoulder by rotating out. So how hard do we need to flex? We need to flex as hard as we need to hold these positions. So you've probably noticed that I don't talk to you guys standing like this. That'd be pretty ridiculous. I flex as hard as I need to. How hard do you hold onto a baseball bat or a golf club? As hard as you need to. You don't squeeze the heck out of it because it's a waste of energy. If you don't hold it hard enough, you're going to throw the thing. So I am actively creating that same rotation in my shoulders and in my hips through that external rotation. And then as the movements get more difficult or the speed increases or the weight I'm using increases, I'm going to twist and torque harder. Okay, so anytime a joint is flexed, I need that external rotation. As I'm holding onto a barbell, I think of twisting my pinkies into it, or I think of my elbow rotating forward, but again, I want to feel it back here. With my feet, I'm always thinking pinky toes getting twisted out, but through my full foot. I don't want to go on the outsides of my feet or anything, or I'm thinking knees out. But again, I want to feel that butt cheeks tight, belly button drawn in, Kegel. I want to feel that rotation in my hip. That's where I'm trying to feel it. That's the key. Okay, so now anytime a joint is extended, so that's going to come up in our jumping motor pattern here. Anytime a joint is extended, we need the opposite rotation. We actually need internal rotation or internal torque in these positions. So from that jumping position, I'm not dumping my shoulders forward and rotating. It's going to happen in the same area, but my hands are actually going to rotate the opposite way. Same thing with my lower half. When I'm extended, so leg back here, we need internal rotation of the hip. And if we have that external, we can get bone-on-bone stuff going on. So what we see a lot of times in runners, they land with that foot turned out. Not only does that not have any stability here for that plant, but as their foot comes back and it's rotated the wrong way, we get a lot of nasty stuff that happens in the hip and in the knee. So as we're doing leg swings, as we come back, we're really working on keeping that hip down and internally rotated, and we don't want these nasty open positions to happen too much. So if a joint is flexed or neutral, we're going to go external rotation. That's everything here, and that's everything here. And if a joint is extended, we want that internal rotation or internal torque. Okay, so those are going to be those types of positions. So now we can use that, and how does this relate in our squat, our push-up, and our jump, and our posture? Posture, everything's neutral, so we're going to externally rotate everything to find that stability. Our squat, we're going to end up bending, flexing the hip, and our shoulders are going to either be neutral or flexed in a front rack position or here in the back rack. So it's going to be external rotation on everything. So I'm always twisting my pinkies, twisting out. On the push-up, everything nice and tight, shoulders back. It's going to be that external rotation. So the anomaly really comes in on the jump, where my lower body is bent and flexed, so I'm externally rotating, but it's my shoulders that are internally rotating here. So that's important because we're going to relate back to the posture, squat, the push-up, and the jump a lot in the foundation videos and everything really we do in here. And what we see is when we start using a barbell, some of the hardest positions for people to remember are going to be our jumping position in a kettlebell swing, a clean or a snatch, where we're actually going to use that internal rotation because we're using our jumping motor pattern. That's going to give us other advantages of being able to keep the bar close, because if I'm internally rotated and I bend, my elbows are going to go up. And so if I'm externally rotated and I bend, my hands go out. So I'm going to be able to keep external loads closer to me. So the way to remember it is always a squat, a push-up, and a jump. Most of everything we do is going to be in this external rotation world. But whenever we're going to use that jumping motor pattern or wherever we're extended at the hip, we're going to use that internal. So things to remember here. It's not about twisting. It's about twisting and feeling that rotation in the torque in the hip and the shoulder. When you control that in the hip and the shoulder, now we really have the ability to stabilize and brace our core really, really well, and we can build a lot of performance on top of that.